Rob.
I can certainly do that. It will be my pleasure. So, if anyone doesn't know, Seth Andrews is a broadcaster, storyteller, author, activist, and public speaker with one of the coolest voices around. Best known as host of the popular website, podcast, and online community, The Thinking Atheist. Originally the product of Christian fundamentalism, unbelievably, today, Seth is an advocate not for religion, but for people. And while he, as a storyteller, loves the distraction of supernatural fiction, like his annual Halloween ghost story broadcast and audiobook, he ultimately encourages everyone to root their pursuit of the truth in reason and evidence, and to pursue a personal relationship with reality. Welcome, Seth Andrews.
Yeah, it's good to be here, everybody. Thank you for allowing me to play along and sit at the big kid table with everybody. And I will admit, the presentation that I've been giving for a good part of the year, I almost couldn't give it after last week's results, and I've been navigating that. But I had a moment to breathe, and I'm going to go ahead and do it, and then brace myself for the response and the Q&A and everything else. So I want to start by talking about something called the reiteration effect, where we tend to believe false information the more often we are exposed to it. And how relevant is that today, right? And on this comic, and I borrowed a lot of the graphics from Melanie Tresick King and her website, which I love, Thinking is Power. Uh, Napoleon was short in the first frame, and the responder says, well, that's interesting. Napoleon's shortness complex was massive. Did you know Napoleon was short? And then the last person says, you probably heard that a lot, but it's a myth. Well, I think Napoleon's a great starting point because it is not true that Napoleon was very short. We grew up believing that his lack of height made him a mockery throughout Europe. This is a myth. The inch, as measured in France at that time, was slightly shorter than those used in England. Historians say that Napoleon was actually an inch or two taller than the average height of Frenchmen at that time. He may have been 5'5", 5'6", whatever. And you and I look at that and go, wow, I didn't know that. That's fascinating. Interesting. We had never checked. It's what we had always heard. We have expanded our thinking on this subject. I've always been told that dogs are colorblind. They are not colorblind. They have a much more compressed color range. Dog eyes evolved for distance and motion, for hunting, really, usually in the low light of dusk and dawn. So their eyes didn't need to locate bright fruits and flowers and that kind of thing. Here is my own hunting dog. This is my son. He is Linus. He is fast and ferocious, a 7-pound Maltipoo, obviously a descendant of the wolf. And I was so relieved to learn that he does have some color in his life. In fact, here's an approximation of how dogs see. On the left is how we see. On the right is what dogs see, a dichromatic image with the reds and the greens compressed into a mix of blues and yellows.
Hey, Seth, I'm colorblind and I don't see a difference here at all.
Oh, well, thanks for that. Yeah, just to
Interesting.
pop the balloon. Pop the balloon.
Wow.
Wow, you say. I learned something. I am
Wow.
altering how I think on this subject. It actually is a myth that if you swallow chewing gum, it stays in your stomach for 7 years. This is something many of us grew up believing. That's false. If you swallow your gum, it passes through like any other food. And this is an adjustment that we happily make in our brains. It's actually a myth that coffee dehydrates us. Caffeine itself is a diuretic. It increases urine production, but you're still drinking something that's almost completely water. So it's hydration and caffeination. That's knowledge I need because I love coffee. Did you know that there is no conclusive proof that sugar causes hyperactivity in children? Uh-oh. This is a point where some people, especially given the reiteration effect, they sit forward in their chairs and they're like, "Nah, that's wrong. Nah, everybody knows sugar makes kids hyper. We've heard it our entire lives, but are we reacting here differently than we reacted with the colorblind dogs and the chewing gum and the coffee? And yet the statement is true. There is no conclusive evidence that sugar causes kids to act differently. That hyperactivity connection was made in a single study 50 years ago. It was carried out by one doctor, and he simply removed sugar from a child's diet, and then he observed, but this has not been conclusively replicated. Sugary foods are part of other environmental triggers that might be responsible. There may be some children that have a hypersensitivity to sweets, but the sugar hyperactivity connection exists almost completely here in the human brain. Now we start to see the personal stories kick in, right? I don't care what you say. Now, when my kids eat sweets, they get crazy. I've seen it. I've personally experienced. We get into the anecdotal fallacy. I've seen a ghost. I know they're real. Removing GMOs cured my ADHD, etc., etc. It's the "it's true for me" defense, or at least it's related to it. Okay, fine. Let's look at a few other long held beliefs that probably won't get anybody all hot and bothered. Check this out: polygraph tests, the lie detector tests, they don't work. This is debunked 19th century technology. You cannot determine whether or not someone is lying just by measuring their blood pressure, breathing, pulse rate, and perspiration. According to people like this guy, former NSA analyst Russell Tice, he said even if the needle did tell us some kind of a real story, you could beat the polygraph. You could fake it out with a few simple exercises. Bite your tongue, or thinks about something exciting. You can distract your brain with arithmetic. You can daydream. You can breathe differently on purpose. And you can tighten and loosen your rectum to beat the lie detector. And I know all of you are trying it now. I know all of you are like, what's that like? I know you're doing it. It's okay. This is a safe place. Your confidence I'm not going to betray that online. But this will come in handy. This is good information if you ever end up at Gitmo. I'm just saying. It is false that you should never wake a sleepwalker. It's actually more likely they're going to get injured if you let them pinball around the place. The American Academy of Sleep Medicine advises that we should guide them gently back to bed. But now you don't want sleepers walking stairs, leaving their houses. Some have even driven cars. That's has happened. We do not want that. Guide them to bed, or if we need to gently wake them up, it's not going to damage them in any way. It is a myth that touching a baby bird will make a parent bird abandon it. Man, I heard this one for a long time. Yeah, I see a baby bird, don't touch it. If you touch the baby, the parent will abandon it. Birds are bonded to their young. And much of this idea links back to an old myth that birds can detect human scents really acutely. Actually, most birds have a limited sense of smell. So we certainly shouldn't be bothering the babies. But if you rescue a chick that has fallen out of a nest, don't sweat it. You know, it doesn't mean the baby will be left behind. It's actually a good thing that you rescued the baby bird. So do it. Here's one that I just love talking about: MSG, monosodium glutamate with a T, is not bad for you. Uh-oh, right? The reiteration effect. Everybody likes to get all hot and bothered about MSG, personal experience, anecdotal stuff, but the claim is a myth. This flavor enhancer has been classified by the FDA as generally safe. There's no discernible link between MSG and all the supposed symptoms: headache, flushing, sweating, pressure in the face, numbness, tingling, fluttering heart, pain in your chest, nausea, weakness, all of that. And people like to talk about how MSG has affected them in laboratory tests. Subjects responded the same to MSGs and placebos. There's no reason to have that no MSG sign on the door of the Chinese restaurant because it's not a thing. Now, given what I have just said, have the anti MSG people changed their opinions? Let's go deeper for a second, shall we? MSG is not just in Chinese food, it's commonly added to a ton of stuff: canned vegetables, ketchup, mustard, salad dressing, deli meat, potato chips, soups. You and I eat MSG all the time without even realizing we're doing it. Now, glutamate is an amino acid that is present in almost all our foods anyway. Monosodium glutamate is an isolated and purified form of it. Now, glutamates are found in some cheeses, many cheeses, fruits and veggies, chicken, shrimp, shiitake, mushrooms, broccoli, walnuts, cabbage. MSG increases saliva. This improves taste. It can be a little bit salty, but it has about a third of the sodium as regular table salt. Unless you have a very rare and specific sensitivity to MSG, you would not feel any health effects at all until you had eaten 3 grams or more on an empty stomach. That is about 6 times the MSG that is present in most meals. And even then, your symptoms would still be mild and they would quickly go away. That is the scientific finding on MSG. Now, this is where everyone within the sound of my voice stands and applauds me. Thank you, Seth. Thank you. We are so grateful for this fresh perspective rooted in good science. Let us all band together. Let us all go get chicken chow mein, right? Let us break chow mein together. Is that the response if I was to go public with this? I expect the skeptical community is going to lean into it a little bit more. But if I go on Twitter, which is still not X, or Facebook or wherever, and I make this claim, what would most people say to me? They'd say, MSG has obviously shrunk my brain. Right? I don't care what he says. I don't care what his claim is. I don't care what the data says. I don't care what the FDA has published. I refuse to put MSG in my body. Well, what's that about? Why the pushback? Even irritation. Some people just get worked up. Oh, you want to see irritation? Watch this. Detox diets are a total scam. Detox is not a medical term in the context of diet. The wellness industry stole the word detox from legitimate addiction recovery programs to sell us the myth that you can eat and drink toxins out of our systems. Now, it's interesting because they never define what a toxin really is. We've already got a detox machine in our bodies. It is the liver. Detox by diet is a bogus claim that is made by an unregulated $50 billion a year detox product industry. This is big business. But wait, you say, that's something that big medicine big pharma, that's what they'd want us to think. I'm convinced even more that detox diets work. Well, what is that about, right? Why the resistance? The $1 trillion wellness industry overall, they've learned to manipulate the marketplace. You play on people's fears. You appeal to their emotions. You freak them out about everything pharmaceuticals, chemicals, Western medicine, which is not a thing. There's just medicine, right? And then they sell us the alternative. And of course, that alternative is conveniently unregulated, unmonitored, and unaccountable to give us results, at least legally. And then there's the appeal to nature, this childishly reductive and incorrect claim that Natural is good, synthetic is bad, right? There are plenty of natural things. There are plenty of dangerous things in nature that will mess you up, if not kill you, right? Things that chemical manipulation has made safer for us to be around. Also, everything is chemical. When someone says, well, I don't do anything that's chemical, I'm like, well, good luck with that, right? Because you are going to starve to death within about 3 days. Everything is chemicals. Yet the appeal to nature, organic, GMOs, by the way, GMOs, that's another uh, completely false, sort of a scare word out there. GMOs are totally safe. But I mean, this affects that. GMOs, vaccines, gluten, right? Gluten's coming for you. Now everything's gluten free. No one understands that the science, I mean, unless you've got celiac disease, having gluten in your food is not going to mess you up. When emotions get involved, you and I aren't really engaging the rational mind. And marketers and manipulators know this. They have long understood this. You and I mean people included in the skeptical community because none of us are immune. You and I are knee jerky, emotional primates. Here's a hot button. Again, I doubt it'll get you too worked up, but man, if I was to go online with it in the overall, I would get some feedback and it would not be possible. And my claim goes like this: Mother Teresa was not a good person. Now, if I was to go online or stand in front of a group of friends, largely religious, probably in my part of the country, and I said, Mother Teresa was not a good person, would people look at me and go, "Wow, that's interesting. Where how did you draw that conclusion? Can you tell me why? Can you show me?" Usually the response is they put their hand out. Whoa, hang on. What are you doing? It's Mother Teresa, right? How dare you go after this saintly woman linked to our notions of purity and goodness? What's that about? What's the deal? Why do people get so upset? And so I'll follow up with a little experiment. I'll say, okay, fine. Can you tell me three things about Mother Teresa that don't have anything to do with where she was born or the fact that she was Catholic? Just give me three specific things that she did: projects, charity events, certain people that she has helped, miracles that she was involved in. Just give me one. Give me one of three specifics. I've been doing this for about 10 years. Nobody, nobody has been able to give me even one specific about her life, right? And so then I decide, well, let's throw some data out. She promoted what she called rigorous poverty. She preached poverty. It's good to be poor. You're more Christ like when you are poor. And then she took money from corrupt governments like the Duvalier family and junk bondsman Michael Milken, who went to prison, and she's enjoying private jet rides and being treated like a rock star, right? She's taking big money. I mean, total hypocrisy. She claimed that suffering, like the passion suffering of Jesus on the cross, was actually beneficial for the world. God takes great pleasure in your suffering. She founded the suspiciously funded Missionaries of Charity. These are supposedly, they're also called Houses for the Dying in Calcutta and beyond. These are unsanitary facilities. Sometimes the patients are handcuffed or tied to their beds. They are given injections by non physicians, often washing the needles in kitchen sinks. And Mother Teresa was given sainthood based on a miracle that is complete crap. There's a whole lot of ink that's been spilled on this, but there was a woman who was healed thanks to the intervention of Mother Teresa. What the Catholic Church neglected to mention is that this woman was receiving scientifically based medical care by a physician at the same time her ailment was cured. By the way, once Mother Teresa was made a saint, the church abandoned the woman involved with the miracle. They wouldn't return her calls, right? So if I talk about all this stuff, right? Her sainthood, a marketing move. She was not responsible. She was a total hypocrite. Very few people out there want to hear it. They love the idea of the charitable mother saint. It's almost like they've adopted her into their heart. It's like she's a member of the family. I have this same reaction when I start talking about the beloved stories of Scripture, the ones that we teach kids even from their earliest ages. The biblical Noah's Ark story never happened. Now that goes over great in Jesustown, Oklahoma, let me tell you, right? All the biology and the zoology, the geology, credible scholarship has debunked this myth. The story even refutes itself. Not only it did not happen, it could not happen. There are previous flood myths throughout Sumerian cultures that predate the Noah story. The Epic of Gilgamesh is just one example. That time period and region, a lot of their gods and religious models had some kind of a flood myth attached to it. It was kind of a genre myth. And, the whole scenario I like to go through, I'll spare you some of it. But I mean, a 500-year-old guy builds a stadium sized boat out of trees and tar. And then, penguins walk 8,000 miles from the Antarctic to go up the ramp alongside camels and anacondas and everything else to be inside a boat. And then the rains come and the fresh water mixes with the salt water. That's brackish water. So both the ocean and the freshwater life all die. And then you got the creatures in the boat with thousands of tons of animal waste that apparently 8 people could shovel out of a single window without dying of methane poisoning. God and Noah were on speaking terms where he got actual cubits, specific blueprints for the ark, and then God went mute, forcing Noah to send a dove out to do recon. And it wouldn't have mattered because even if land is discovered, the ark has no sail, no motor, and no rudder. It cannot be steered. You could have been 50 feet from land, it would have sailed right on by. What did the animals eat whenever they docked finally? And how did 8 people commit incest to create over 20,000 ethnic groups in less than 4,000 years? On and on and on. So I throw all this data out, and I think it is solid data, right? The entire story falls apart at the first glance, at a cursory glance. It's the same deal. How dare you? How dare you? Because people take the Bible and its claims and its stories and the religion it represents personally. An attack on their faith is like an attack on a family member or themselves. And so some of the defenses begin, including the appeal to authority. Well, God said it, so I believe it. Pastor Douglas Wilson likes to riff on this one. I don't have to prove it. Jesus said it, so I accept it. That's how it is. I mean, it's just remarkably lazy. The bandwagon fallacy: if the Noah's Ark isn't true, why do billions of people believe in Christianity? Or why is the Bible the most printed book in all of history? The sunk cost fallacy: I've believed it for so long. I'm pot committed, not going to walk away from it. Or they just turn on you or me. You're just evil. I'm going to pray for you. I refuse to listen to the wickedness of worldly man. I've heard plenty of that over the last decade and a half. We are challenging a familiar and cherished identity. Speaking of identity, Americans love this one. We are the greatest country in the world. So I check the
That's a hard
statistics
no. A hard no.
against other nations, and I wait for the response. Switzerland overall is number one, right? Then Canada, Sweden, Australia. The United States loses in almost every metric: the economy, quality of life, happiness, crime rate, healthcare, education, cultural influence. Statista says that we rank first in 2 categories: one, military spending; two, national pride, meaning that Americans are number one at saying we are number one. Even though the claim is statistically untrue, people do not want to walk away from it, right? I don't care what you say, we're the greatest country on the face of the earth. The COVID vaccine is safe and has saved millions of lives. How this is controversial in the supposed enlightened era, I do not know. You're taking the journey with me. But I've got anti vaxxers on my own YouTube channel who are atheists, and there are people who would see me start with COVID and they would just get up and leave, right? But let's imagine that they stuck with us. And so I thoughtfully present some data. The Center for Disease Control reports that, of course, you cannot get COVID from the vaccine. That was a common fear. You're going to get it's like the flu shot, right? Don't get the flu shot, you'll get sick. Well, you might feel a short term side effect, but it's impossible to get the flu from a flu shot. It is impossible to get COVID from the COVID vaccine. There is no live virus, and vaccines don't shed their components. The vaccine components themselves are safe. In fact, you'll find some of those ingredients in many of the foods that we eat. The COVID vaccine will not alter your DNA. This one blows my mind. I mean, it's impossible to alter, to mutate your genes. It never enters the cell nucleus where DNA lives, you know? Um, what's another one? Hang on. It won't make you infertile. They should warn pregnant women not to get vaccinated. No, pregnant women should get vaccinated, right? It's absolutely safe. Not only will COVID vaccines not microchip you, they contain no metals that can even produce an electromagnetic field. Bill Gates is not monitoring you by satellite as you sit on the toilet and get your mail. All right, so relax. I found this an interesting statistic that Democrats are more than twice as likely to view the COVID 19 virus as a major threat. And it was Democrats and liberals, I think, who were more science based, who were more apt to go and get vaccinated and booster shots for the vaccine. But COVID has become so politicized, right? It's not a vaccine, it is a statement about us. So accepting or rejecting the reality of COVID has become a statement about who we are and who is endangering who we are. Resistors and disbelievers have often been primed to see an evil scheme, an attack on their American freedoms. Even if they thought COVID was a real danger, many of them don't, but a few do. More important to them is that they push back on vaccine mandates. Nobody is going to tell me what to do. For many people, the United States means rugged individualism. So, collectivist values, working together, societal responsibility, that sounds an awful lot like government overreach and socialism. People like to throw the word out, socialism, which means I guess we turn into 1980s Soviet Russia. Government mandates equal tyranny. My identity as a free American says never, never, never. Now, I'm going to show you kind of an intense photograph here really fast. It is a photo of a smallpox victim on the left. Smallpox killed over 500 million people in the 20th century alone, one of the most contagious and deadliest diseases known to humankind. This is English scientist Dr. Edward Jenner, and he proved that a mild dose of cowpox infection would inoculate people against smallpox. And within a few years, word of the vaccine and reproduction of the vaccine had become pretty intense. But anti vaxxers lost their minds, and they declared war on Dr. Jenner. Check out this anti vaxxer propaganda cartoon. This is from 1803, and it depicts Dr. Jenner, and he's inoculating people. And when he does, all of a sudden, they start to look like cows. Here's another one. This is an editorial cartoon. It shows children being fed to a diseased cow like monster. This cowpox solution was coming for their children, right? Fear, misinformation, disinformation, distrust, conspiracy theories, science, denial, public endangerment. Does this sound at all familiar? And this was a 19th century movement. This was a resistance culture. It was an identity. Here's another one. New seatbelt requirements met rabid opposition in the 1950s, and free Americans protested the belts were more dangerous than crashes. This is part of how they defended it. Well, if you're in a crash wearing a seatbelt, it'll cut you in half, right? They're more dangerous than the crash. But more importantly, no one's going to force me to strap one on, right? Being unrestrained is who I am as an American. And then we get into false equivalence claims. Two or more things are the same despite obvious ignorant or important differences. I'm standing up for my rights. I'm not going to wear the seatbelt or the mask. I'm not going to obey vaccine mandates as part of a society because I am like the persecuted Jews in the Holocaust, right? We've heard actually some people invoke the Jews of the Holocaust, saying that American Christians were going to be rounded up in this way, forced into things against their will. No one shall enslave me against those persecutors. I, the righteous rebel, will cry freedom. What a rush! What a rush to identify as the hero in your own story and then to coalesce and join with other heroes of like mind. And the more you are opposed, the more right and righteous you are. Here's an interesting one. I don't know how you feel about this guy. I used to buy into the boy genius thing. I used to buy into that. And of course now I find the man horrifying. I call him Phony Stark. But I think, Teslas are great cars. Uh, I think SpaceX has done some cool stuff. I attribute that a lot of that to the scientists and the innovators and engineers that work at those enterprises, and not to Elon himself. Elon, in my mind, is not a good man, right? He's not. And I'm surprised and amused by the sticker I've seen some people start to put on their Teslas, and this is totally real. The sticker says, "I bought this before we knew Elon was crazy." I just think that's hysterical. I wish they were being mass produced somewhere. But the EV, the electric vehicle, I kind of like it. Beyond the Tesla, I dig the electric car in general. There's the Hyundai Ioniq and the Ford Mach-E and the Chevy Bolt. I think they're cool. I don't kid myself. There used to be this thinking that if you drive an electric, it automatically makes you an environmentalist like this guy. You've saved the planet. We know that's bogus. I mean, there are advantages, but you're still using fossil fuels that drive the grid, that charge the cars. We're still figuring out lithium mining and lifespans, recycling, disposal. All that stuff is legitimate. But beyond the discussions about gas versus electric, I have noticed something interesting where I live, in the oil and gas state of Oklahoma. There seem to be a whole lot of people in my state who apparently equate car and truck exhaust with American freedom. It's not just what they think, it's who they are. So I meet this guy. Me driving along. He's in an F-150, and it's got Eagle decals on it, and it's got a lift kit. And so I'm talking to him through the window about electric cars. And it's interesting to see people talk about cars themselves, the gas car, like it is an American invention. It is not. The German inventor Carl Benz first patented the gas vehicle back in 1885, hashtag Germany. But tell me, these gas-powered trucks don't just scream America. Oh, yeah. How about this one? Yeah, that's straight up USA. That's patriotism. Or another example, it's got the flag, it's got an eagle, it's got the Constitution, and it has Donald Trump. literally printed on the side of the vehicle. This is an identity. Many will flat out tell you that they think EVs are a slippery slope. Environmental cars, well, that means the environmentalists don't like fossil fuels. That's a Biden Harris thing. Now we're getting to laws for emissions, government oppression. They want to regulate how we drive. This is tyranny, right? Notice anything about those freedom convoys? You see a Tesla in there, right? Now, this is a scenario that I'm going to give you that some people may call a stereotype, and I might be guilty of stereotyping, but being in Oklahoma, I'm just going to toss it out and you can take it or leave it, okay? Once I see a guy who is driving a truck with this emblem on it, I will bet that I can tell you 20 other things about the driver. Would this person ever buy an EV? Nah. Political party? Republican. Not a Democrat, at least. Ethnicity? I'd wager white. Religion? Oh, yeah, he's Christian. Favorite news channel? Fox News. Did they get the COVID vaccine? Don't you bet on it. Are they vegan or a meat eater? Don't even start with this one. We know they're not vegan. Do they accept the science of climate change? No. Reproductive choice? No. Are they a gun owner? I'll bet they are. Probably a pistol in the glove box or under the seat. How do they feel about those immigrants? Probably not a fan. I've heard some people say they like to use their gun at the border. Nationalized health care? Uh-oh, that would be socialism. We don't do socialism in America. Now, again, these are guesses. Maybe they're stereotypes. But I think it's legitimate to observe and address trends and tendencies that we see. And I'd like to think I've got enough Oklahoma equity to be able to make the observation. That guy will likely be a white Christian nation, free market, oil and gas, gun toting, love it or leave it, American conservative. Weird about LGBT people, distrustful of foreigners, love to bomb the Middle East, just bomb the whole damn thing, turn it to glass, Probably has an equal number of Bibles and firearms. I saw this photograph as posted at Patriot Takes online. Check out his shirt. White, or Christian, white, straight, unwoke, unvaxxed, gun owner, meat eater, and male. How else can I piss you off today, right? Those aren't just his opinions. He's embraced this as who he is. It's an identity. He might as well display this symbol. He probably does somewhere in his life. And that symbol, by the way, the blue line symbol, is a response to another identity group, Black Lives Matter. Now, I am not making an equivalence argument here. I certainly think that one identity or one group, one cause has more merit than the other, right? It's not a one or the other 50-50. But Black Lives Matter is an example of an identity belief that people like me and you probably feel very strongly about, condemning racism and abuse within law enforcement and our overall culture. I mean, the true claim is that Black people do face greater dangers against police brutality. The system's broken. It needs to be fixed. The bad cops have to be rooted out, found, fired, prosecuted, and education and procedures within the system must evolve. We identify as agents of equality. In the wake of Black Lives Matter, the thin blue line symbol has become a tribal response. No, they say. Now, you talk about cops like that, you vilified the police. You're anti law and order. The men and women in blue need our support. Blue lives matter. It's interesting, by the way, that this symbol has become the darling of many white supremacist groups. The Back the Blue identity group makes this blanket statement that we should stand behind police, period, whatever they do, because they are unfairly vilified and They enforce law and order out there. And in that light, Black Lives Matter protests against police racism are actually a betrayal of law and order. All the men and women in uniform are being painted with that brush. It's binary thinking, tribal thinking, right? We are just, they are unjust. How much listening, conversation, mind changing takes place between those two groups? I would say pretty much zero. Because very often, instead of thoughtfully exchanging information so the best ideas can rise to the top, everybody locks down and reinforces and usually retreats back to their tribe. This is one of the things that makes flat earthers so frustrating to talk to. You ever spoken to a flat earther? I met a guy, an atheist engineer in Chicago years ago. Flat earther. I just thought, how does this happen? Right. And so you and I do what we do. We present the basic science. Yet, flat earth is not just a belief. It's an identity. It's a culture. It's a family. The more attacked these people feel, the more they dig in and shut down. Then comes the fallacy known as the Galileo gambit. Somebody claims that being mocked actually proves they're on to something, right? So the more they come after me, the more attacked I am. Well, that's awfully self conscious. They sure don't want this information to get out. It's all a big cover up. And here I am, the hero, banging the drum to wake the public from its sleep. This revolutionary person, Galileo or whoever, they had a radical idea. They called him crazy. My idea is radical. They call me crazy. I'm like Galileo. Einstein's usually the most common one I've heard. You know, people called Einstein crazy. They call me crazy. I'm like Einstein. I hear that quite a bit. There is a fascinating documentary. It came out in 2018. It's streaming on, or it was streaming on Netflix, called Behind the Curve. Flat earthers conducted their own experiment to prove that the earth was not a sphere. And so they took a point A and a point B, and they took a laser and they shot it out with the destination point way, way, way down here. Because the earth was flat, the laser would travel a straight line and it would meet its destination. What happened? The laser did not meet that point because the destination was lower and the laser went right over it. Did these flat earthers have a moment of epiphany and say, aha, the earth is a sphere, it is not flat? They did not. You know what they did? They said, we're going to go back to the drawing board and we're going to create an experiment that gives us the result we want, right? They need a new experiment. That's the problem. It's maddening, right? They're not influenced by the data, they're protecting an identity. This is the 2018 Flat Earth International Conference at Crown Place Airport Convention Center in Denver. And the MC there was rallying the crowd, and he said, I'm not ashamed of ridicule. I'm not ashamed of mockery. I'm not ashamed of insults. And the crowd cheered him. Yes, yes, we are not ashamed. You know, it's interesting. I find I am not ashamed an interesting line because it rings very familiar. 9/11 truthers say that it was all an inside job. I believe it with all my heart, and I am not ashamed. Aliens secretly live among us. I believe it with all my heart, and I am not ashamed. Chemtrails are government mind-controlled drugs. I believe it with all my heart, and I am not ashamed. There's a secret cabal of Satanist Democrat blood drinkers trafficking our children out of the basements of pizza parlors. I believe this with all of my heart, and I am not ashamed. We are a Christian nation founded by Christians for Christians. I believe this with all my heart, and I am not ashamed. Christianity is the planet's biggest in group identity group, quoting proudly and defiantly from the Bible, "For I am not ashamed of the gospel of Christ. I believe, we believe, unwavering, solid, faithful." So you and I do what we do. I've been doing this for I don't know how long, right? As an ex Christian, I show up and present scientific data. I talk about how the Bible and its religion fail scientifically, historically, morally. Do believers in those exchanges presented with facts open up like they might with the dogs that seek color or hydrating with coffee? They do not. I used to think, naively, I used to think that I could just walk into a room with facts, make my case, and minds would be changed. And then we would all lock arms and there would be, light from the sky and Enya music and confetti, and we would all frolic together off into Reasonville. I know that was just so naive. Instead, what happened when I presented the debunks to all the bunk in the Bible and the Christian religion, people would either get in my face, they would go blank, or they would just get out. They would leave. And I did not understand. Why am I not getting any traction? Everybody's not just unconvinced, they doubled down. They're more a brick wall than they were when I started. What's that about? The amygdala is the part of our brain that processes emotion. It is the center for physical threat response, fight or flight, or fight, flight, or freeze. Now, the same part of our brain fires up at an ideological threat, as does with a physical threat, right? People feel threatened in both cases. This is why they lock down, blow up, or walk out. And so you and I are up in somebody's face and we're like, on this highly charged issue, you are wrong. People feel pushed around. They feel attacked, humiliated, maybe, and then it's fight, flight, or freeze. And you know what? I'm not interested. And we would expect in other cases they would be. Well, tell me more. That's interesting stuff. Why don't we sit down over coffee? Let's exchange perspectives. I want to pursue the best ideas, man. And if you've got better data, I sure would like to know what that's about, man. Let's spend some time on this. That's what we would want to happen, but it doesn't. It just doesn't. With a perceived or a real attack, people will then retreat to a place where they feel safe, with people who have their backs, with things that are comfortable and familiar. So the anti vaxxer retreats to the anti vax Facebook group, and the flat earther goes back to the flat earth convention, and Christians go back to their Christian churches and social groups because it's there that they don't feel uncomfortable. They don't feel attacked and humiliated. There, they're reinforced and validated, they're protected, and they're safe. And if we are engaging people, and I'll use Christianity as an example, if we're engaging them trying to explain why we think it's tremendously problematic to believe the Bible, we are going to have to become a safe place. Okay? Now, I'm not saying that mockery and satire don't have their place. I like this meme. Flat Earth eclipses are awesome, and it shows the disc with the little line. It's awesome, right? I use a lot of satire and mockery, ridiculing the ridiculous on the broader macro stage. Or if I'm going after a high profile or tremendously influential bad agent, a legitimate bad agent out there. But if I was talking one on one, in a room with a flat earther, I would not show them this meme. That's not what I want to do. I might post it generally on the Thinking Atheist pages, but I'm not pointing at a specific person who might be a good person, simply misguided. We don't lead with what a ridiculously and irredeemably stupid position you have, even if it is really stupid. I'm not saying there are good people on both sides in every case. Post election, man, I've been going through it. I've taken a hard stand in the last several days to condemn the agents of hatred and harm. And I'm not letting people who are voting and acting and speaking and maneuvering to endanger others, I'm not letting them off the hook. I'm not singing kumbaya with the autocrats, the oligarchs, the white supremacists, even many of the deluded, not in the shadow of what is happening all around us. I think we all have to draw our lines. We have to decide when and how to engage, if we engage at all. There are some people, but I thought, they're too far down the well. Maybe somebody can reach them, but that person's not me. I'm just not able. I don't have whatever it would take. But wherever and whenever we engage out there, if the goal is to change thinking, to convince, to rescue somebody, right? When they're not a good person, it's different. Mockery has great utility. We like to talk about satire and how it brings down the powerful, right? Satire is meant to reduce the power of the elite, stripping them of their self-importance. We're not talking at this moment, and I have to throw this out because someone's going to quote mine me and say that Seth thinks that we should go soft on the people who are trying to strip us of our democracy. That is not what I'm saying, okay? I'm not talking about powerful fascist predators. I'm not even talking about bad agents among regular folks. I'm talking about others. Mockery for them is a terrible way to go. It's a terrible and terribly ineffective method, right? Ideas are fair game, but in the face to face, if I'm talking to someone who is an anti vaxxer, who is a flat earther, who is a Christian nationalist, or whatever, what would mocking them achieve? It would achieve the opposite of what I am trying to achieve. Or maybe there's no interest in changing their mind, and that's valid, right? They are them. Sometimes we take this too far. I mean, there are sometimes when you and I are like, fine, if you're going to go this far, then my goal here is to correct the record. I'm not here to try to change you. I just want it on the record that you are factually unsupportable. You are morally unsupportable. And here's why I'm convinced of that, right? But so often we partition ourselves into us and them. Human beings are tribal. And then we say about everybody, they're lost causes. They can't be reasoned with. They're too stupid or too awful to even warrant my time and oxygen. And I understand where that comes from because I've been feeling a lot of it, right? Like here is different than here in my heart. There are some people who are unreachable agents of harm, but we tribal human beings cannot paint everybody out there with that brush. Dr. Arthur Brooks is a social scientist and a contributor to the New York Times. He wrote an article called Our Culture of Contempt, and it referenced a 2014 study published by the National Academy of Sciences, which talked about something called motive attribution asymmetry. Each side is convinced it is driven by benevolence. The other side is evil, motivated only by hatred, and therefore is an enemy with whom one cannot negotiate or compromise. You get two parties in a room, both engaging motive attribution asymmetry. They are evil, they are motivated by hatred, and you can't even get it through their thick skulls. They are them. And atheists do this. I'm telling you, we like to think we're immune from being emotional meat bags, animated meat. We can be knee jerky, we can be reductive, and we can just be freaking wrong. And if we think we cannot be, we have made a major mistake. Battling bad people with a quote, also has another function. It kind of serves us. It signals to our tribe, look at me. I am worthy to be here. I am worthy to be in the in group. And so we're kind of running for office. We want to make sure that we never appear disloyal or ill qualified or in disagreement in a way that might risk consequences, specifically something called social death. Shunned, cast out, vilified, destroyed by the group that once was our family. We don't want that. No, no. We don't want to be kicked out of the house. David McRaney has written about this in a book called How Minds Change. And he talked about people who had an epiphany whether they were a 9/11 truther or flat earther or whatever. And they evolved their thinking. They embraced better ideas. And what happened to them? Their in group turned on them. The place that was safe turned on them. And then that group committed itself to destroying their lives. And some of the stuff they did was unconscionable, involving their partners and their children on the internet. It was just horrifying, right? They put somebody in a box and then they crushed the box. Now, how often are identity beliefs reductive? A, B, yes, no, good, evil, black, white, when many things can become true at the same time. It's a crazy complex world. This whole idea that there's a one or other total 100% answer is just crazy. It can be true that racism, corruption, and the abuse of power is a cancer that infects American law enforcement. But it can also be true that many of the over 700,000 American police officers are good men and women. They do a difficult, dangerous, and usually thankless job. This complicated subject doesn't fit in a box. The United States is a gun culture, and for many people, guns are a statement projecting identity. Now, I hate the National Rifle Association. I just hate them. It's a gun cult, I swear to you. And I think it's insane that civilians should ever have access to AR-15s. But many people might be surprised that I myself own two handguns, which I use occasionally for target shooting. I am trained and licensed, and I keep them safely in a gun safe. And I would give those guns up if there was ever a federal mandate to do so, because I'm more interested in collectivist values and supporting societal responsibility. That's a nuanced position. Which box would you put me in? Am I pro gun or am I anti gun? I go hard at fundamental religious claims and dogmas, especially those that get into high control stuff, purity culture, health threats, etc. And I've been fighting Christian nationalism, especially in our current climate. But I will fight for someone's private, personal right to be religious, to worship how they want. And in my life, my religious friends are largely really good people. Fit that in a box. It just doesn't go. Natalie, my wife, she would identify herself as spiritual. All right, so I'm an atheist, but she believes that there may be something out there, whether it's God or something else. I don't really know how we define that. But we stand apart on that. Some people would point at Natalie and say, what an idiot. You know, she has no evidence for any of that. We don't know if we go there, what's that about? But the truth is that she's my person. She is the best person I know, and someone that I share my life with on the deepest level, right? I mean, does she deserve to be vilified? Is she an idiot for being spiritual? How would you categorize her? I think bans on the hijab are a bad idea. Some people want to outlaw the hijab. But I also know how the veil has been used to oppress and enslave and dehumanize women. So I don't think it should be celebrated or promoted. I think we've seen a lot of those Cosmo magazines, you know, and everyone's trying to be inclusive, and I get that. They've got somebody in the veil on the cover, and wow, great, look how open a tent we have. The problem is they are validating the oppressors. If until the hijab is free for everyone to wear, it should not be held up in that way, not when it oppresses so many people. But in this all nothing world, in the binary thinking world, how would you categorize me? Am I pro hijab or am I anti hijab? It's messy, it's complicated. This is life. I watch some atheists and religious people and how they talk to each other and about each other. You idiot. No, you're an idiot. You're a sheep. No, you're a sheep. You have the religion of Christianity. Fine. You've got the religion of atheism. And we reduce and reduce and we label and dehumanize. We shout and scream and mash at the keyboard. It's easy for us to get caught up in that and want the destruction of a declared enemy, the other. Again, here at the end, I'm not saying that all this stuff's equivalent, right? I'm not saying that opinions, beliefs, values, communities, groups, ideas, I'm not saying they're equivalent. Not remotely. Also not saying that we shouldn't take our values personally. I have very deep feelings about my convictions and opinions, as do you, and that's totally valid, you know. But when it comes to changing minds, if that's the goal, changing minds, I can tell you that this is not working. Screaming at each other, especially on the internet. Jesus Christ, this is not how we fix the world. How many good people have had bad ideas? And how many of those people were eventually rescued from bad ideas? And if you and I are interested not just in cursing the darkness, but also in spreading some light, I think we have to ask ourselves a few basic questions. Do we treat people like people? Like they've got personalities and families and dreams and lives and value? Can they be a good person with some bad ideas? Have we ever been a good person with a bad idea? Or are we less than human when we did? When we engage, are we arguing to win? I mean, that's fun, especially on Facebook, etc., right? It feels so good to win. I like this meme, right? How I feel when I win an argument. This is me. Oh, it's a rush. It's so tempting. Am I using the language of escalation? Am I turning the temperature up or down? I can get my snark machine going like that, and it's escalation. You know, your opinion's idiotic, or I jump in with some sort of a one liner. If my goal is to change a mind, that is not going to do the job. Am I sending but not receiving? Maybe they're not the only brick wall. Yes, atheists can have shitty ideas. We can have really bad ideas, and we have to be aware that we can have bad ideas, and maybe the person engaging is wrong. And already in our minds, we're going through all the things that we're right about because that's how we're wired. And maybe we are right. But I think intellectual humility is mandatory if we're going to be honest in this crazy world. And how much of what's happening is about defending an identity? They defend theirs, I defend mine. I like what research professor and author Brene Brown has written. She said people are hard to hate close up, move in. And I know it's hard given the climate out there. There are genuinely horrible human beings, but very often they're just people. And I'll offer this little observation. If your first reaction to what I've just said is to say, forget it, they're all rotten, they're all stupid, they're all bigots, they're all unreachable, lost causes, and I'm just going to blast and block and blow them out of the water with no hesitation. You know, I'm reminded of that line, all generalizations are false. The world is messy. Not everyone is a single thing. This is situational, and sometimes people genuinely are not lost causes. They're not hopeless. You want an example of somebody who's hopeless, somebody unreachable? Christian, nationalist, anti gay, bigot, a God and guns, evangelical, Reagan conservative, tethered to dangerous mythology and bad ideas. You want to see that person? Okay, fine. That person is me. About almost 30 years ago. Look at all that hair. Oh, I miss that hair. But that was me back in the 1990s, just a few decades ago. I wasn't a bad person. I was a naive and sheltered and indoctrinated kid. I was a perpetrator of bad ideas, but I was also a victim of bad ideas. I had humanity. I wanted to do the right thing. I was a loving person. I just needed a chance to discover the larger and better world. Sometimes we do have to draw the clear line. Sometimes we do have to take the hard stand. I'm going to say it that one last time. Sometimes we do have to go hard. We have to do battle, right? But we can be really lousy at choosing our battles. And I think many identity believers can be influenced and even reached if we first appeal to our shared humanity, to their humanity, and then also to our own. A great resource for productive conversations is street epistemology. This is a method for engaging people out in the real world, eye to eye, face to face, voice to voice, using the Socratic method. Lots of questions. You don't get in their face. You just say, "Oh, tell me about that. Can you explain that? How does that work? Wow, what would you say to this or that?" And it starts in short segments, just a few minutes. You don't push it. And then maybe you rendezvous again in a few weeks. They've had a chance to stew on it. And you go a little deeper, and there's never an attack. There's never an assault, no humiliation. You're not degrading them, or any of that stuff. It's just goodwill communication. You're engaging in good faith. Man, I think this world needs more of that. Good faith and goodwill in this culture of reductiveness and cruelty. I've already mentioned this wonderful website, thinkingispower.com. It's a whole site that is loaded with resources, helping us to understand how beliefs are formed. It explains how even the smartest people can and do get fooled. And it has a whole lot of resources for being better thinkers in this world. In my own education, I learned that my little guy Linus is able to see the world in color. And I think we have to try to remind ourselves to do the same. The stuff isn't black and white. There's nuance. There's a spectrum. It's situational, right? I'll admit lately I have been seeing mostly red. I will admit this. I can feel the veins in my forehead. I've experienced the sleepless nights. I am grieved and enraged by the assault on democracy and decency. I'm terrified about the future. I am legitimately angry at those who are enabling the authoritarian, the autocrat, the oligarch, the assault on our Constitution, the attempted establishment of theocracy, the vilification of LGBT people and immigrants and foreigners and whatever, right? I get it. I get it. I think many times that's appropriate. I'm frustrated. But I'm going to also refocus and remember that not everybody fits into that category. Not everybody can be that. Not everybody is that. Some people genuinely are good people with bad ideas. And I need to refocus that in my brain. I have to remind myself through force of will as an exercise. I used to be a genuinely good person with bad ideas. There's a ton of other people out there that are the same way. I will sometimes go hard. I might shout and mock and destroy. I mean, the Marjorie Taylor Greens and the Elon Musks, they're not going to get any quarter from me, right? But with everyday people who are good people who have bad ideas, I've decided in my own life I'm going to try to bark less and wag more. This is a little dog psychology that I'm trying to have a little more Linus in my heart these days. I need some goodness. I've got to try to remember that we are all humans on this rock. I've got to try to do a better job of seeing others as humans, trying to become better humans, because I desperately want to exemplify the goodness that I want to see in the world, to rehumanize humanity. And I think that is something worth identifying with. And that is the presentation that I have for you today. Thank you so very much for watching and for listening. It's been a real honor. And I guess I'm at your disposal to have some discussion and take questions.
Yes. Thank you so much, Seth. I kind of need that refresher after almost a week of being existential despair. So thank you.
And I just have a bunch of scientists screaming behind me because of what's about to happen.
Oh, great.
Here we go.
So do we want to do poll results first or Q&A?
Let's see the poll.
Let's do the poll. All right. So I'm going to share the results. So why facts don't change your mind? So the first question was there a time you firmly believed something and facts alone change your mind? It would, that's actually a really nice jump of like 67% of people, actually have facts change their mind. So Awesome. 7% said no, and 20% said not sure. Do you believe we are swayed by our emotions? 95% said yes. And then only 4% said no, and 2% said not sure. And do you have an understanding of resources to fact check your info you see or hear? Yes said 35%, no said 15%. I think so, 44%, and not sure says 6%. So on that note, Seth, do you have any advice for people that actually want to actually fact check and make sure they're getting like actual information, not just things that are swayed one way or the other?
Well, I mean, this is messy. I tried to start with what I would deem to be reputable news sources. These are sometimes legacy resources or ones, I mean, that are open to being fact checked by others. Was it Abby Hafer? Dr. Hafer used to say, well, when you hear a claim, go and research the harshest criticism about that claim and then determine if it comes from an actual scientific source, right? I mean, did it come from nature? Did it come from a scientific organization that has been vetted and is not the Discovery Institute, or did you find it at freedom.eagle.facebook.deepstate.com? And I like to use multiple sources whenever I can. It's funny, I use this method whenever I'm researching my True Stories podcast. It's a short form show where I tell these little 7-minute vignettes and about everyday things that have happened in human history. And then at the end, I kind of give you a kicker and I pull the rug out from underneath you with a surprise. It's based on the old Paul Harvey Rest of the Story broadcasts. But even Paul Harvey, who was a national ABC News broadcaster, got some facts wrong in his stories. And so I'm having to use multiple historical websites, not History Channel, but I'll get into Britannica or I'll get into universities like Stanford and others that teach history. So I think, honestly, it's trying to find reputable sources from actual educational and scientific, vetted organizations, whether it's a university or an actual science organization, and using multiple sources to correct the others. It's imperfect, but that's how I operate. So,
No, I think that was a really good answer. Thank you. It's not easy to like think fast and like to think slow when
yeah.
you're, especially if you're on Facebook or any social media and a meme pops up or something like that, and you emotionally react to it rather
Yeah.
than going, "Is this true?" or a story
And
that pops up.
I believe
So,
Melanie's site that you had some of the slides from has some information on this
yep.
where it rates some of the sources regarding their validity or trustworthiness, I should say. Yeah.
Mhm.
And by the way, folks, we're going to have Melanie Teresa King back on, and not too long from now, early next year.
That'll be 2025, y'all. So, all right. And the last question, do you get angry when people don't want to hear you newly discovered facts? Yes at 28%, no at 13%, sometimes 58%, and nobody's a Vulcan, unfortunately. So, all
Yeah, so
I
right, any
want to, if
thoughts?
I may,
Thoughts, opinions,
I
ideas?
want to piggyback on something about emotion. It's funny,
Mhm.
when I came out of the faith, I remember thinking we are now in a logical culture, the atheist movement. We're all logic, it's data, it's fact based. And it was so monumentally naive. But when I first began producing interviews or thought pieces, video essays, and I would use storytelling tools that evoked emotion, whether it was like a moving music bed or the way something was lit or the way the camera moved, the way it was edited. These were obviously designed to evoke a feeling. And a few people contacted me and they said, how dare you try to emotionally manipulate me? I came out of religion. I was emotionally manipulated. We need to be about the data. Well, I'll tell you, first of all, the church may have harmed some people, and I understand a resistance, right? A very suspicious nature when you don't want to be manipulated in that way, in a negative way again. But all storytelling is manipulation. When I produce a piece, I do a podcast, when I write a blog, when I write a book, when I give a speech, I have an agenda. I want you to feel something about the things we're thinking about. People cannot change their minds without engaging the heart. Emotion is a massively critical part of how we impact the culture. One of the best ways to humanize, to influence, to alter thinking, to expand perceptions, stories, human stories. I could walk in about the LGBT community and the science of sexuality and all these things. And it's not that that's invalid, but a lot of people are just going to say, oh, data, great. I walk in and I tell the story of a specific person with a proper name, where they came from, what they do, what they're like, what their character is, how they feel against the shadow of bigotry, and how they worry about their future, and the fact that they have been villainized by the culture. They often feel unsafe to go out, and yet they have such big hearts, and all they want is to live their lives on their terms. I go there, and now people are starting to open their hearts as well as their minds. This is not a cheat. We must be able to feel things about the things we think about, because that is part of what makes us human. So,
Very true. I agree. Thank you for saying that.
mhm.
Thank you very, very much. Okay, Rob, do you want to start it on the Q&A?
Oh, I can do that. And
You can.
yes,
I believe in you.
this is a general question, Seth. Not quite about what you spoke about, but how you speak. How do I get a voice like yours? Someone asked.
Well, I was a chain smoker at the age of 6, and so really it just caused the voice to go way, way down. So, I don't know. It just changed when I was in school, and I was kind of a natural communicator. And I'm really a
Actually,
style over substance speaker. I try to mask the lack of really rich content with just a smooth style, hoping
Oh.
nobody knows the difference. So yeah, that's what I do.
I do have a question though. Like you were talking about your theory about your dad. Like, did you develop like when you were because you've been doing like radio and podcasting for so long, did you kind of develop like maybe subconsciously repressing your accent through that?
Well, for those who don't know, off air, we were talking about how I managed to avoid a really thick Oklahoma accent, even though I was born here. And my father being deaf and not, he only read lips, we had to sort of articulate our words. And I wondered if maybe that helped me to avoid some of that, even though I can get my Oklahoma on pretty easy.
Let's hear it. Let's hear it. You have to say
Well,
something.
I'll throw out a y'all. Hey, how you doing? How y'all doing? I can do that. I'm not quite the liberal redneck. I'm not quite Trey Crowder, but I can get close. But
I'm always gonna be the liberal redneck.
I
So
was I was doing a lot of public speaking even as a kid. I was a spokesperson for Youth for Christ. I was student council president. And then I busted into radio at a very early age. I was 22. And when you first get into radio, you feel like you have to sound like a radio disc jockey. So you make this error that most of us make getting into the business and some never get out of, where you start talking at people instead of to them. And you become what we in the business would call a puker. So you're like, Q107 FM, beautiful day in Dallas, Texas. Don't forget to be listening tomorrow morning to Mike and Mandy in morning. You do that, right? Well, we call those people pukers, and you are instantly
I love
replaceable
that name.
by another puker. I'm just saying. And it took me years. It took me years to say, you know what, Seth, stop talking at people and be who you are. And you can be polished and professional, but you don't have to sound like you were, they grinded you out of a radio factory somewhere. Just, try to incorporate who you are into what that is and allow people to take you personally. And then that's where relationships between announcer and listeners develop. And it took me some years to get there, but it's the product of over 30 years of broadcasting. So,
So tangential to that question and answer, I notice a similar voice quality in evangelical preachers that I hear on
mhm.
television. Do you think they're putting on a performance to sound a certain way?
Well, I mean, it's with squillions of preachers, I think it's case by case. But what we have in common is that preachers are very often amazing storytellers, right? They are in front of a group, holding their attention, building a narrative. Some are terrible. Some you just look at your watch and you're like, get me out of here. And then you pull this. The Lord's leading me to a different congregation. No offense, preacher, but we're going to go elsewhere. But most preachers, there is a performance to what they do. A lot of those preachers are absolutely lovely human beings who are absolutely sincere in trying to do the right thing. And they believe they are using their gift in the service of not just the Lord, but in humanity. And I have to say that there are some lovely, amazing, moral, right, just good preachers out there. And then there are others who are con men and grifters who know how to manipulate emotions to make themselves rich and even harm other people and prey on other people. But I think it's case by case with so many people on the planet.
Yeah, somebody in the chat put the point that the word, maybe I didn't use, was there's a certain cadence of their speech that seems to be similar.
I don't think I sound like Josh Feuerstein, but have you guys seen that guy when he's like, it's almost like that Baptist revival preacher when he's like, if you died today, would you know if you went to heaven or hell? I'm going to play another stanza on the organ. Come forward. Don't wait.
Yeah.
Give your life to Jesus Christ. Do you want God in your life?
Oh, I
I
see some
do.
people reacting very badly to that by hearing it.
It's like
I
they
will say
all
though,
went to,
you have a good voice for NPR.
they
And I
went
listen to
to,
NPR because I'm better than you. But like
okay.
you have a very good voice for NPR. So
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think, you'll find commonalities among storytellers, but there is a riff on storytelling that preachers kind of lean into that makes them sound more preacher-ish. Not as much as there used to be with the cool church crowd, but yeah, it's out there.
So I haven't listened to a lot of imams preaching. I wonder if they have a commonality that's different to their preaching. Have you ever listened to an imam, I mean, speaking in English in the United States or whatever?
Not much. I've seen a few things where there usually is a caption underneath as the imam is, the reason I would get into it is because he's promoting some kind of a human rights violation against women in a high control Middle Eastern theocratic Muslim nation. But I'm not aware. I'm not well versed in the cadence of the imam. So no.
Okay. Helen, you want to ask the next question?
I can read. So hypothetically, is there a contingency plan for when Jesus comes back with his gang of angels to smite everyone? I want our military to have enough people left after the rapture to fight like it's the end of the goddamn world. This is our planet. We can't let the absent parent take over without a fight. So what's the contingency plan,
Oh
Seth?
man.
I'm sure you have one.
Wait,
Absolutely.
wait, the contingency plan if the rapture happens?
Yes. What's the contingency plan?
Oh God, I'm going to be going house to house to get the pets, to care for the animals of the people who were raptured, right? What kind of God would allow animals to remain behind locked doors to freaking starve to death? It's the atheist heroes who are going to have to go out and rescue the rest of the world. So that will be my first priority.
I do believe there's
Are
an
you going to charge money
entrepreneurial
like that other
idea
person that is there? There's a
that,
person, I think there's a few people online. They're like, well, take care of your animal after
yeah.
you've been raptured. And they're
I've
like,
actually seen that
for racket.
advertised as you pay the insurance to have that. Yes. People
Exactly.
are making money out of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Next question was, how do we respect a person without condoning their toxic beliefs?
I don't know. I said when I spoke in Knoxville with this presentation or a version of it, that I don't always know where the line is drawn. The difference between holding a belief and being a person of really ugly values is that's a tough one. I talk about myself as a former Christian. I know in my heart I would have rejected much of what we're seeing around us today, even though it wears the mask of Christianity, because I was a person of good values. I was a believer. But even if I disagreed with LGBT and all these other things, I would be like, well, this is crazy. This is a bridge too far. And so I would approach the younger me in good faith, knowing that I was a person who genuinely did care about people and felt like he was doing the right thing and wanted to do the right thing, even if I was totally off base. My heart was in the right place. My intent was good. And then if I met somebody who had, a I don't know, a bad faith approach, or they were demeaning to other people, or they were just horrible human beings. They had really enabled an attack on democracy and decency, like we're seeing. I would approach those people a bit harder. Or in my own life, I'm not sure I would be able to approach them at all. Right now, I'm pretty raw. And I have to know that about myself.
Mhm.
I'm not in the headspace to sit down eye to eye with someone who just voted to essentially dismantle democracy and decency. I'm not in that space, and I need to know that about myself. But, if there was someone who I genuinely felt was misguided and ached to do the right thing, I might engage there. I think trying to determine intent is the first thing that I do. And I try to do that online. It's a little harder when you're not face to face, but where are they coming from? Are they just trolling? Are they showboating? Are they, trying to colonize me into their religion? Are they demeaning? Are they oppressing? Or are they just someone who truly believes and needs a shot at a conversation with someone outside of their bubble? Gauging intent. That's all I've got, and it's a tremendously imperfect answer. I'm sorry.
Well, yeah, you have to meet people where they're at, especially yourself.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah. Okay, next question. Okay, so this is a little long, but I'm gonna read it. Any chance you can make another video like your leisure Christian spouse that addresses not so much the belief aspects, but the identity aspects that you've been touching on? I feel like I need that for the majority of my family to be able to speak about anything without it being perceived as personal rejection or attack. I'm not going to go into the full thing, but that's, they're
Of
dealing
of,
with being a
of
liberal person, an atheist, and dealing with, having those issues and wanting to express those feelings in a way that's honest.
Yeah, that's a possible. For those who don't know what we're talking about, I met somebody at a presentation I gave years ago in Little Rock, Arkansas. And after I was done, he came up and he'd attended by himself. And he said, my wife, doesn't know I'm here, but my marriage is about to end because when we got married, I was a Christian, and then I realized I didn't believe it anymore, and she freaked, and she wants to take the kids, and she just she says she doesn't even know who I am anymore, and this isn't the deal she made, and so things are. I think we're probably going to end up in divorce. I don't know what to do. And I just hugged the guy, and I told him how sorry I was. And then I had 4 hours to drive home to think about it. And I thought, if I was to have, I'm supposed to be a communicator, right? What if I could, what if I could speak to that woman for just a second and try to humanize her husband's journey, because it was my journey. And so when I got back, I just turned on the camera and I spoke for 15 minutes, and I called the video Letter to a Christian Spouse. And you can find, I think I updated it. You can find it just Seth Andrews, Letter to a Christian Spouse. And it works for parents and children and friends and anybody that you know who's looking at you like, what the hell happened to you? And it explains that, hey, your husband didn't choose this. He didn't wake up one day and say, I want to throw everything I once held dear to the wind. I want to traumatize my family. I didn't choose to not believe in it. I just realized I did and admitted it. And then I talked about, is he still the same person? Do you still see the same attributes, the same characteristics? Do they still tell the truth? Are they simply trying to be honest about a very difficult road that they're on? Would you trust them with your keys, with your possessions, your valuables, your home, your life, trying to rehumanize the person so that they don't see the label atheist, but they see the person that they originally fell in love with and maybe understand a little better some of the trauma they've gone through. And so I might be able to format something that talks a little bit about people and their journey in terms of their identity and why they may have left one group and maybe wandering out here, or maybe they're part of another group they find has more merit. I'll have to think about that and find out how that might be formatted. But it's an interesting idea. So thanks for that.
Okay, so the next question was, would it be more appropriate and less binary to remind ourselves that people are human instead of, quote, good people? Equating people espousing harmful ideas with good character seems unnecessarily reductive.
I don't know. I mean, I think intent's important. Again, we're human, understanding we're all flawed humans. We're all biased. We're all susceptible to bad ideas. We can all get taken. We can all get conned. We've all had horrible moments where we've said and done horrible things. We've all had our worst moments. We've all been in the valley. We've all been the least attractive version of ourselves. But I don't think it's invalid before I engage to have my radar up to try to find out, who is this person? What is their intent? Are they operating in good faith? Because quite frankly, if the answers to those questions are no, I'm not going to waste my time. I'm just not. I'm not going to give trolls any of my oxygen. And people who are acting in horrible ways, if I approach them, I may approach them much differently than somebody who is genuinely demonstrating goodwill, good faith, empathy, and humanity. So I think gauging intent remains valid.
Right. The sort of one
All
that,
right, one more question.
yeah, read the one, the last one in the list, because it's sort of tangential, Helen, to this one.
Yeah. Okay, I think it says, how does one experience moral injury by maintaining connections with persons who repudiate your values? This is a tactic agreement and thus moral compromise and injury. That is complicated. I think someone's asking, how does one experience a moral injury and still
Or
maintain
do you
connection with persons
experience?
that repudiate your values?
It's actually,
I'm clarifying.
it's do you experience moral injury if you
Do
maintain
you?
connection?
Okay, do
Yeah,
you? Do
yeah.
you?
Okay, let's try. Let me see if I can steel man this one.
Uh,
If
Please do.
if I if I am maintaining some sort of a connection, relational connection with someone who is acting in contrast to my values, is it a de facto validation of that relationship?
Yeah,
Is it
that's it. Yep,
a
that's the thing.
tacit validation? Well, I'll tell you,
Yeah.
I probably am not hanging out with people who are acting in contradiction to my values. I'm probably not maintaining close associations with people who are acting to harm the people and the causes that I care most about. However, I reserve the right to engage. I reserve the right. Now, I've had some people say, well, don't ever have this kind of person on your show because then you'll be platforming. And if you platform them, you are endorsing them or you're legitimizing them. I don't know that I buy that. I think engagement is not necessarily endorsement. I think sometimes it's fine to have both light and heat, and I reserve the right to speak to and engage privately or publicly anybody I choose to in the arena of ideas. And, but I don't normally spend too much time on people who are trying to tear down what I'm trying to build up. You know, I'm more interested in the people who are not closed systems, where there may already be the cracks that can let in the light, and where I feel like progress might be gained, even in my own life.
Okay, I like this one. What should be done to better promote rationality amongst those who are still willing to listen? Any good organizations or activism that you are a fan of and can recommend?
Well, I think the primary tactic that I recommend is when you find somebody who believes a ridiculous idea, you look them in the eye, grab them by the shoulders, and then shake them violently for about 45 seconds. Just shake them violently until something rattles. And that often will produce the kind of epiphany that you and I are seeking out there. That's a freebie, right? That's a
Sure.
freebie. I'm not going to charge you for that little piece. That's a gem that you can just file away for later on.
Got it.
It's funny. I think it depends on what you need. If you are tooling yourself up to have. I think because data does play a role in the engagements that we have. I just think we don't walk in with a data baseball bat and lead with it. We don't bang them over the head. That's not how it works. But I think we do need to be educated and prepared. We don't have to know all the answers because nobody does. But I think understanding what we are talking about is important. I have links on my own site to a bunch of other wonderful organizations, whether it's books and podcast videos, et cetera, at thethinkingatheist.com. Again, Thinking is Power, probably one of my favorite resources because it's easy to use, it's easy to navigate, and it's kind. It's not religion is a mental illness. It is not some of these horrible arguments I've seen in the atheist meme verse, right? This site treats people fairly, and it's not afraid to shine the spotlight back on us because we are all human. Was it Richard Feynman who said something like, once we think we can never be fooled, we already have been? I think it was Feynman who said that. And those are the big ones that I like to use. And then street epistemology. I think go on YouTube and just watch some of these short form exchanges between street epistemologists and just everyday folk walking down the sidewalk. It's fascinating. It's fascinating to watch them many times for the first time in their life being meaningfully challenged on something that they had just assumed on the order of years or decades. You can almost see the little lightning bolt, ding, 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 like they don't know how to answer it. The seeds planted, and then when they go off and in the privacy and safety of their own environment, they can consider, and they might because they weren't attacked in the first place. Street epistemology, I guess those are my favorite resources.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Seth, for being here again, because I've volunteered you to. So thank you so much for coming and do another
You're
talk.
lovely people. It's
It's
an
deeply
honor.
appreciated.
It's an
Oh, go
honor,
ahead.
and Recovering from Religion is one of my favorite organizations, and you are some of my favorite people ever. And so it's
You're one of my
thanks for
favorite
letting me
people
be here.
too. We love you so
Thank you.
much. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah.
All the love. Thank you so very much. Again, I'm gonna make like when it gets to the end of the year, Seth has to do a talk. So
You're
so
very
them's
kind.
the
Thank
rules.
you. Thank you.
Also, thank you to all of our wonderful volunteers. Thank you to Rob for being a wonderful co-host. Thank you to Glenda for being an awesome troll stomper. Thank you to our wonderful friend Sasha, who helps run support groups. Thank you to Nikki for streaming this into the Discord. Thank you so very much. Okay, so guess who's coming up next week? It's me. I will be giving a presentation next week on death, the high cost of living, how to find meaning in a meaningless world. And then the following week will be Erica Matthews, Guts Gibbon. And Forrest Valkai will be on again. So please come and be here at RfRx because it is the best night of the week. And also, you're going to follow us on all the social medias. We are on Facebook. I'm going to go ahead and put links in the chat. So we have a Facebook main page. And then we also have we also have a support group page. We are also on Instagram and we are on the TikTok. And we are at 211 episodes of 1111 of all of our previous talks. So you are going to go like and subscribe and do all the things because I told you to.
And
I'm
Seth's
volunteering
done a
you.
few of
Go
them.
do that.
Seth's up there, right? I think Seth has done this at least twice
Yeah,
before.
Seth. Yeah, Seth. This is your third talk or fourth?
Gosh, I have the memory of a goldfish. I don't know
Me
the
too.
answer. By the way, that's also not true. Goldfish have
That's
longer
also not
memories.
true. They also have a very long
Yeah,
memory.
yeah, yeah.
So there's a fallacy. Hey, Rob, can you tell everybody about the benefits of volunteering for recovering from religion?
Yes, I
And
will.
why
But
everybody
before
should.
I do that, I just want to mention that it sounds like we're about to shut down, and we're not going to do that. So just so people don't all leave, right? What's coming up right after we do this little
Oh
segment?
yeah. So after this, thank you, Rob, for the reminder. This is why I have another brain cell with me. So after we turn off the recording, we're going to move to the hangout. Seth, can you hang for the hangout for a little bit, or do you need to go and be with your lovely wife?
I'm going to need to probably go and attend to my family, but I'll be with you in spirit.
Okay,
And I don't,
that is
I'm,
fine. Thank you so
I'll
much for
be
being
busy.
here. But we will turn off the recording and we can hang out and talk about whatever the hell you want to talk about. I'm sure nobody has any opinions of anything that's going on right now. So anyway, so we're gonna do that
It's
after
been a very
we
slow
wrap up
news week.
here.
Very slow news week. All right. So the last
It's
thing we're going to
very
tell you
nothing happened at
about
all.
RFR is the benefits of volunteering here. And then we're going to have Gail give a closing remarks. So, yeah, we've learned here that healing can also come from helping other people. RFR volunteers find meaning and purpose by volunteering with us. All the services we provide for our clients are staffed by volunteers, and we always need more people. Um, there's all sorts of jobs besides the front end people who do chats or answer the phone or even who are on here. We need people to find and vet and post good resources for our clients and our agents to use. We need people to host our support groups, to support the online community that we told you about. We even need people to do IT support. And what we're doing now, people will need to take this and edit it and upload it to YouTube, and you can volunteer for any of those things. To apply to be a volunteer here, you can fill out the form on our main page, which is a little link at the top. Again, it's recoveringfromreligion.org, and it says volunteer. And also, if you want to tell anyone else about our services, one of the best ways to do that is we have a fairly new 3-minute, just 3-minute long video that goes through all of our services. It's introduced by our president and founder, Dr. Ray, and you hear about all of our services. And you can search that online by looking at RFR What We Do, or you can go to our main page and it's right there.
So now I'm going to introduce our wonderful executive, Gail Jordan, for her final thoughts before we move to the hangout. So welcome, Gail. Thank you so much for being here again. We love you.
Thank you, Helen. Thank you, everyone, for sharing your Monday night with us. I know it's been not the week we thought we were going to have, and so I appreciate you giving us the time. Seth, I particularly appreciate you coming. I know when we do these presentations, they take energy and intensity, and I so appreciate on a difficult week you coming and presenting this to us. I think we needed to hear this as much as anything else this week. It's hard for us to sometimes remember what it was like to be back in that bubble. And so I'm going to close out with talking a little bit about when you volunteer with Recovering from Religion. It's a double whammy bonus. Not only do you get to be part of a great group of volunteers and you get to pay it forward, so to speak, but you get to participate in one of the most dramatic events by helping someone. Remember that our mission statement is that we provide hope, healing, and support, and that's absolutely what we do. But what we're working with when our clients stay with us and they join our support groups and they join our online community, we're helping them to develop critical thinking skills. And many of us, and I'll put myself in that category, didn't even know we didn't know those when we were religious people. I think Seth and I probably would have both been proud of the fact that we thought we could think for ourselves. We were not stupid. We thought hard and deep about our faith. In fact, we worked hard on our faith, and we would not have accepted or believed that we didn't have the critical thinking skills. And yet here we are. And when you have the joy and the privilege of helping someone, even in the midst of the crisis, take those beliefs apart and look closer and sit with it and feel the feels of having been wrong and having been misinformed and come full cycle. I don't know, as Seth was talking about the methods that we can use to help people get better about what they believe. I don't know that we have a better model than what we do here at Recovering from Religion. Street epistemology is fantastic. This opportunity to volunteer with Recovering from Religion, they're coming to us. Our social media team puts out our information. People come into our helpline. They come into our support groups. They come into our online community, and they're receptive. And they're asking questions and they're having doubts, and we get to help them along that journey. And it's a privilege beyond anything that I have experienced. So if you would like to join our team, we'd love to have you. This difficult week and in the days ahead, If you need some support, if you need someone to talk to, if you need to feel a sense of community, there is no better place than Recovering from Religion. Whether you come in as a client or you come in as a volunteer, please consider joining us. What we have learned is, we learned this, unfortunately, the first time, the importance of community. We're all going to need to gird ourselves up for the days ahead and for the difficult times. And while in your real life, you may struggle with that a little bit, particularly in isolated and religious areas, here at Recovering from Religion, you have a home, you have friends, you have a community. Thank you, everyone, for coming. I hope you enjoy the hangout. Have a wonderful week, and I'll see you back next Monday.